This is the ARRI SR2 16mm film camera. It is a very well-known workhorse of a 16 film camera that has been used for decades on indie shoots, large productions, documentaries, and student films. The SR2 was released in the early 1980s, following the original SR, which stands for Silent Reflex, which was released in the mid-1970s. The SR2 was later followed up with the SR3, released in the early 1990s. The SR2 is a production quality camera, offering a 400-foot film magazine, a relatively quiet operating noise, the ability to operate at a sync speed of 24 or 25 frames per second, and allows you to mount a variety of lenses on it depending on the lens mount of the model, which I will get into shortly. You can also outfit it with a variety of additional accessories, matte boxes, follow focuses, and even modern video taps, making it a pretty versatile and often budget-friendly option for shooting 16mm. And ARRI, of course, is a long-standing motion picture film equipment manufacturer in Germany, which is also where these cameras were made. This SR2 belongs to LIFT, the Liaison of Independent Filmmakers of Toronto, here in Toronto, which is an independent film center, and it is available to members of LIFT as a rental camera, which means that yes, it has been used quite often over the years, but it is still running nice and smoothly. I've also, a couple of years ago now, made a video on LIFT's other production 16mm film camera, the beautiful Aton XTR production. So you can go check that out as well if you're curious about that kind of camera. There are a number of modifications and variations of SR2 models out there in the wild that you might encounter, but I'm going to talk largely about the basics of this camera and touch on some other things that you might encounter depending on ones that you use. Let's take a quick look at just the body of the SR2 and how we're going to power it, and then we can take a look at how to load the magazine, how this works, how it goes back onto the camera, and then a deeper look at the camera overall. The body of the SR2 is this kind of L-shaped design, and there's really not that much to it once you remove the magazine. It has a completely flat base where the magazine sits, the film gate is on this side, the viewfinder and a handle on the top, the lens mount and shutter assembly on the front, and on the rear at the base is also our power connector as well as some accessory ports. This SR2 shoots a regular 16mm frame size and not the wider super 16mm frame size that some versions of this camera shoot. This camera specifically also has a recently added Videotap on the side, which means that you can mount modern SDI compatible monitors. The monitor then displays exactly what is shown through the viewfinder. The SR2 receives its power at the very back of the camera on the base in this 4-pin connector port here. Now, depending on the camera that you have or who you're renting it from, there are a few different versions of how people are powering the SR2. You might encounter original style SR2 batteries, which look like these. They've likely been resold because the original ones from the 1980s have died and are no longer working. And if you're lucky, you might also have this kind of 4-pin pivoting connector that slides into the power port at the back and then has this kind of plug connection on the top here that we slide the batteries onto. It can then kind of pivot out of the way so that you can work and remove the magazine. For this specific SR2 though, we power it through V-Lock batteries, which look like these. About the same size, a similar weight. The V-Lock batteries though are closer to 15 volts of power and the SR2 takes 12 volts power. So a lot of people would just plug these directly into the SR2, and the SR2 is capable of handling that power, but it isn't necessarily good for the camera over time. You can use accessories with these higher voltage batteries to bring them down to 12 volts, which is friendlier for the electronics of this camera. We have a couple of these Condor Blue D-Tap hubs, which allow you to plug the V-Lock battery into them, and then you can plug the camera into just the 12 volt port on this battery. For the sake of this video, I'm going to use this extension 4-pin connector, and the hub, I'm just going to kind of trail the battery off camera here onto this cart that I have. But you can get very nice accessory plates that allow you to mount gold mount and V-Lock batteries onto the back of the camera, just like this original kind of pivoting connector. LIFT, unfortunately, at the moment doesn't have one. You can get creative though and combine it with accessory plates like these that just sit on rods, so you can attach that to the back of the camera. But just for the sake of this, I'm just going to kind of get the battery out of my way here. The other thing that's really important to mention about power is that the camera has an accessible overload fuse on the base right here. If this blows, then it can be changed, and ideally there will be spare fuses in the little plastic cover here. There's also a very similar looking compartment right in front of that area, also on the base here, where you can switch the camera between 24 frames per second, 60 Hz, and 25 frames per second, 50 Hz. You will likely never change this unless you're in a very specific situation. But I am in North America, I'm supplying it with North American power, which means that it is going to stay at 24 frames per second, 60 Hz. Now, I'm just kind of going through this video in a very controlled environment, but because I have the magazine off of the camera, you should also be covering the gate of the SR2 with the body cap, which just clips in here to cover one of the most important areas of the camera, which is the film gate. The film magazine for the SR2 looks like this, and it is capable of handling rolls of 16mm film up to 400 feet in length. You can either load daylight spools onto it, which look like this, and this is what your film comes on if you buy a box of film that looks like this. And it can also handle film on plastic cores, which look like this. And this is what your film will be on if you buy a can of 400 feet of film, which looks like this. These plastic cores are also sometimes referred to as bobbins, which is something that I had not heard of before until I was told that by my friend Natalia in Finland. So shout out to Natalia in Finland. Let's take a look at how to load the magazine, then we'll put it on the camera, and then we'll look at the rest of the camera. And yes, I promise that at the end of this video, I will shoot a little bit of 16mm film. The film magazine of the SR2 looks like this, and is capable of holding rolls of 16mm up to 400 feet in length. It can accept 16mm film, which is either on cores, which is what you will get when you have a 400-foot can of it, or on daylight spools, which is what you get when you have a 100-foot box of it. The SR2 magazine is what's called a coaxial magazine, which means that the film starts on one side of the mag and winds up onto the other side of this divider. If you're lucky, the magazine has a cover on the front to protect the pressure plate area. This can be removed by pressing up and pulling out. On this side of the magazine is where the film supply will go. Pressing this button down and turning the knob will unlock and open the compartment. This portion of loading the film needs to be done in absolute darkness. Either a dark room, a changing bag, or a changing tent are typically used for doing this. The exception to this rule is if your film is on a daylight spool, but if your film is 400 feet on a core, then it needs to be in complete darkness. In this area of the magazine, we have our central hub and our film counter arm. The SR2 magazine will very likely have one of these on the hub. This is a core adapter. Do not lose it. It is integral to being able to put a film core into the magazine. I'm using this scrap roll of film to demonstrate the loading of the magazine, but again, it should be done in absolute darkness. When you have a 400-foot roll of 16mm film, it comes in a can, inside of which is a black bag, and inside of that is the film wound tightly onto a plastic core. First, make sure that the arm of the footage counter is pushed backwards where it will click into place to be out of the way. Now we just put the film core onto the core adapter and it will securely hold the roll. The end of the film needs to be coming counterclockwise off the roll at the bottom, with the perforations of the film facing outwards towards you. Taking the end of the film, we push it into the opening here at the front of the magazine. It should catch onto an internal transport roller and come out the very front of the magazine at the top here. If it's a little tricky, then we can turn the gear on the other side of the magazine here, following the arrows on the gear, and this will turn the rollers in the magazine and help us to advance the film through. Once this is done, we push the footage counter arm into place against the roll of the film, making sure that it's properly sitting against the film itself. Sometimes you have to nudge it upwards a little bit so it sits right in the groove of the arm, and then we can close this side of the magazine, making sure to turn the latch so that it locks closed. Now everything else after this can be done in the light. The first few feet of our film will be exposed as we load the magazine, which is okay, but the remaining large roll is protected from the light. It's really important to remember that footage counter arm, by the way. The arm controls an indicator on the back of the magazine, which moves down as the film is shot. This is a very accurate way of keeping track of how much film is left in the magazine. Now we slowly pull the film out until we reach this mark on the bottom of the magazine, keeping it flat against the mag to measure correctly.
This accurately gives us enough film to create the necessary loops above and below the gate for the film to run through the magazine smoothly. You can also prevent yourself from accidentally pulling out more film than you need to by holding your thumb over the gear so that no more can easily be pulled out. Taking the other end of the film, we loop it up into the bottom slot here. This can be very tricky, and it's also hard to see exactly where that slot is, so you just have to start to get a sense of it by feel. And this is the part that I see the most people getting stuck on. You just have to push the film in until it catches on the same kind of transport roller that is on the other side. Slowly push the film in while rotating the gear to catch the film on the roller and move it through into the take-up side of the magazine. Be careful here. The transport roller is grabbing the perforations of the film, and sometimes it might grab in between the perfs. You'll see the film then have these marks as it comes out the other side. This is wrong, and you cannot run the camera with the film loaded like this. If there is any sort of resistance to turning the gear, then it means the film is not positioned properly. It should move nice and smoothly to feed the film out of one side and into the other. I've found that if you're really having a tough time, cutting the film halfway through a perforation may help that roller grab the film a little easier. Be careful as well that as you're turning that gear, you aren't feeding out too much film, or else the loop will become too big. As you turn the gear to pull the film back into the magazine, it's also turning the other side to push film out of the magazine. You can always turn the gear backwards though to rewind the film and kind of restart if you're having a problem. With the film in the take-up side of the magazine, we clip it into this piece, which is called a collapsible core. Now as we spin this, we can see the film smoothly moving through the magazine. We push this arm against the roll to help it wind up properly. Close this side, and the last thing to do is take the film loop and push it under these little guides on the pressure plate. This pressure plate has a bit of a spring and movement to it, which helps push the film nice and flat up against the film gate of the camera. Don't worry too much about the loop being positioned exactly, as it will kind of sort itself out once you start running the camera, but you can position a perf over this opening on the pressure plate so that it will smoothly line up with the claw and pin right away. Okay, so that's loading a 400-foot roll into the magazine, but there are a few other things to mention. First of all, if you have a collapsible core in the camera, then the film will wind itself onto that as you shoot. Unloading these can be a little scary. Once you're done your roll of film, you need to go back into complete darkness. And here you need to remove the film from the collapsible core and very, very carefully transfer it onto another core and back into a film can for taking it to a lab. My technique for doing this is to remove the entire ARRI collapsible core from the magazine and then carefully place it on top of a core. Then you unclip the end of the film and gently drop the entire roll down onto the new core for the lab. The film will sit loosely on the core, which is okay, and the lab will deal with it from here, but you need to make sure that all of your precious footage doesn't start to come unwound and turn into a tangled mess in the dark. After this is in the can, be sure to put that collapsible core back into the magazine. If your magazine just has another core adapter on this side though, then you need only to have an empty core which your film can take up onto. For unloading this, I like to take the entire core adapter off easily, pop it out of the core, and then remembering to put that adapter back into the magazine. The SR2 magazines can also easily take 16mm film that is on daylight spools. You simply remove the core adapter by pressing the middle of the hub and sliding them off. Again, do not lose these. The daylight spool can slide right on and lock into place. You can also have the film take up onto a daylight spool by doing the same thing on the other side. An important thing to note though is that the footage counter arm will not sit properly against a daylight spool, which will make your footage counter on the back of the camera inaccurate. The SR2 magazine though has another film counter here, which you can set to 0 at the time of loading the film, and it will advance as you shoot. This is another way of keeping track of your film, and the only accurate way of doing it if you're using a 100-foot load. When you're running the camera with film in the magazine that's on a daylight spool, it is usually much louder than when you're running the camera with film in the magazine that is on a plastic core. So remember that.
This is what the camera sounds like when you have film on a core in the magazine and you run it at 24 frames per second. Now I'm standing right beside the camera. And this is what it sounds like if I have film on a daylight spool inside the magazine and I run the camera at 24 frames per second. See, there's more of like a rattling kind of squeaky noise to it. With our film loaded into the magazine, we can now load our magazine onto the camera. And this first involves removing that body plate that I put on. And all I have to do is kind of push up a little bit and then swing it out and pull it off of the camera. Mounting the magazine onto the SR2 is very, very easily done by simply aligning the two metal tabs at the top of the camera with the same area up here as I just pulled the base plate out of. So this kind of little rounded area at the top. It just kind of pushes into here and clicks into place and then swings downwards and locks onto the body of the camera. On the top of the magazine is this kind of lever that I can push and hold down, which is what I will do if I want to remove the magazine from the camera. Push and hold it down so that I can lift the magazine up and pull it off of the camera's body. Now there is also a little silver connector here as well, which acts as a little lock. So if this is locked in place, I cannot accidentally push this down to remove the magazine. You have to unlock it and then you can remove the magazine. Now we have the film in the magazine is on the camera, which means that we can look at the controls of the camera, how it runs, and then its various other functions and features. The SR2 is a very basic camera when it comes to the controls on it, which are located down here on the side. The camera has three main settings. There is off, there is standby, and there is on at the very bottom. And these are controlled by this kind of switch lever. So when it's at the very top here, the camera is off. If I pull it down, and it has a spring where it kind of wants to spring back into off, which is a good safety feature, but if I pull it kind of all the way down until it stops gradually, this is standby. This is where I would set the camera if I have any accessories such as triggers or remotes that operate the camera. It needs to be in standby for those to work. When I push the camera switch down to the very bottom, then the camera will turn on and start running the film. And this is the camera running at 24 frames per second. The appeal of the SR2 is that it is really a very quiet camera. It is operating at around -30 decibels, which is, I think, 3 or 4 decibels quieter than the original SR1 camera. Compare 24 frames per second on the SR2, that sounds like this, with 24 frames per second on a Bolex 16mm camera, which sounds like this. That's what you get when you're working with a camera that is designed to be used for recording sound on set versus a Bolex, which is not really a camera that's designed to be used when you're also recording sound. You can also see that the camera has this flashing red light that comes on when we're running the camera. So you can tell that the camera is on, it is fully on, it is transporting the film. We can also see the inching knob is spinning rapidly to indicate that the shutter is spinning at its full speed. And now to turn it off, I can just press this and it will spring all the way up, not into standby, but all the way into off. At the very, very bottom here is a little silver pin, and this is a lock button. So you can slide this into place forward, and then the lever cannot be switched down into either standby or into the on position, which is an extra safety feature to prevent you from accidentally turning the camera on to run film when you don't intend to. Right beside the switch is this little red button on this model. Sometimes the layout of this panel is a little different design-wise. On certain cameras, which I will mention later for SR2s, there might be some additional buttons here or an additional unit kind of up here where this one has the Videotap, but I'll get to that. But right here on this model is a red button that says test. All of the cameras have this. It might just be a button that looks like a little bit different. And this is the button that you can hold down that will slowly advance the film through the camera at about 2 frames per second, I believe. And you can use this in order to make sure that the film is running moving through that magazine properly. This is where you would want to listen for any sort of resistance or any sort of odd noises, clicking, anything that indicates to you that the film is not moving properly. If we're looking through the lens mount at the shutter and the film gate area from the front of the camera, we can also see the shutter is spinning very, very slowly and showing us a frame of film. It's not easy to tell, of course, but each frame of this film is a different frame that the camera is advancing in between those shutter blade movements. This SR2 has the original ARRI bayonet lens mount on it. You can find SR2 models out there that have been modified so that they no longer have the original mount. They now natively take PL lenses, but this is the ARRI bayonet lens mount. ARRI bayonet mount lenses have these two little tabs on the back of the camera's lens, and they align with these two openings on the lens mount of the camera. In order to mount the lens onto the camera, all I have to do is align the tabs of the lens with the two holes on either side of the lens mount. I will slide the lens all the way in and then rotate it clockwise until it clicks into place. In order to remove the lens, I do that in reverse, but I have to hold down these two silver tabs that are on either side of the lens mount. There's one on both sides, and as I hold them down, I can then rotate the lens counterclockwise and pull it directly out of the mount. This SR2 has this geared ring around the lens mount of the camera, and the prime lens kit that is available at Lift has these kind of silver wings that can slide into this groove of this bigger tabs on the geared ring, which will then allow you to utilize it as a easier focus ring. It can also be paired with certain follow focus accessories, which can slot into the teeth of the gear. Now I'm just going to remove this lens from the camera for a moment so that we can look inside at the shutter and the front of the film gate of the camera. This is a film camera, which means that if you haven't used one before and you're not particularly familiar with it, it's really, really important to remember to be very, very careful with this area. The same care that you would take if this was a very precious digital sensor of a digital camera, because inside of here are the mechanical movements related to the actual shutter of the camera. It is a physical, mechanical, spinning disc, which is how the film is exposed. Inside of here is the shutter of the SR2, which we can see is a mirror. This is a half moon shutter. So the shutter disc has a 180-degree opening, which is the shutter angle of this camera, and the other half is a mirror. As the shutter spins, the mirror reflects the image through the lens back up into the viewfinder, and whenever the open portion of the shutter passes it, it exposes a frame of the film. As the shutter spins, the film is advanced and the shutter works in perfect unison with the advancing of the film. With the shutter in this position, the film is protected from being exposed, which gives it time to advance to the next frame. This advancement is accomplished with the pull-down claw beside the film gate, and this synchronization between shutter and advance results in frames being cleanly exposed on the film with even spacing. The SR2 also has a registration pin, which helps to lock the film into place when a frame is being exposed. If I have the shutter running and I'm pointing this digital camera at the shutter, then it synchronizes up so perfectly that it looks like the shutter isn't spinning at all. When you stop running the camera, the SR2's shutter will always automatically stop in place so that the mirror part of the shutter is sitting behind the lens so that you can look through the viewfinder with the camera off and still see through the lens, and that single frame of film behind the lens is being protected. So the shutter closes, the pull-down claw pulls that next frame of unexposed film into place by the film gate, the registration pin locks that film into place, the shutter opens back up, and a frame of film is exposed before the cycle starts again. And this happens 24 times a second, every second that you're running this camera. We can also see the film running if I carefully, and I mean, you would never do this when you have actual unexposed film in here, but we can see it running as we open it. This is running at 24 frames per second. The shutter, pull-down claw, and registration of the camera can slowly be moved forward manually by rotating what's called the inching knob on this side of the camera right here above the test button. As we rotate the inching knob, we can see the shutter moving, we can see the pull-down claw moving, we can see the registration pin going in and out. But this is also very important to do in between takes if you're shooting, because you can also see directly into the film gate, which means that you can check the gate after you're done shooting and check to make sure that there's no hair or debris or dirt or anything that could get in there and expose itself onto the film and potentially ruin your shot. So this is how we check the gate. You can use a blower, you can use a light brush from the other side here and clean that gate area. If you have to remove the magazine, you can, but you can also easily check it with the magazine on, because you will see any sort of hair or any dirt kind of around the film, the frame of the film, when you're kind of looking directly in at it. As I mentioned earlier, this SR2 has a film gate, which is a regular 16 size film gate, which means that it captures a regular 16 sized image onto the film. A regular 16 is a 4:3 aspect ratio, so it's that old school square movie aspect ratio. It does not shoot a Super 16 sized image. Super 16 is on cameras that have a physically wider rectangular gate, which is an aspect ratio closer to the classic widescreen 16:9. This camera does not have that. There are plenty of SR2s out there though that do shoot Super 16. Some were built that way, manufactured actually as Super 16 cameras by ARRI originally, and some of them have been modified later on. But originally, a lot of these were regular 16 cameras. You can use all modern film stocks that you can possibly get your hands on in 16mm in a regular 16 camera. The majority of stuff that you're going to encounter out there has a single line of perforations down one edge of the film, which is single per film. You might find double per film. It's a very kind of specialty thing, usually used in old kind of cameras, but you kind of usually have to go out of your way to look and find double per film. The majority of stuff that's out there is single per film. You can use that for Super 16, regular 16, doesn't matter. You don't need Super 16 film to shoot in a Super 16 camera. You just need a Super 16 camera to shoot Super 16. This is a regular 16 camera. The viewfinder for the SR2 is a reflex viewfinder. So when you look through the viewfinder here, you are seeing out the lens here. It goes down through and looks through that mirrored portion of the shutter disc. It can pivot around the camera like this so that you can access it from this side. It can also pivot this way as well. So it can move in quite a variety of different ways. And you can also adjust the diopter focus of the viewfinder, which is not the focus of the actual lens. It is the focus of the viewfinder optics, so that when you look through the viewfinder, the frame lines on the ground glass inside of the viewfinder will be in focus. Adjusting the diopter focus is done by first loosening this lower ring here, and then you can adjust the diopter focus of the viewfinder, and then you can lock that focus by tightening the bottom ring, and then you cannot adjust this by mistake. The viewfinder is also very nice because even though you can pivot it around and look at it from different angles, the image in the viewfinder stays correctly oriented. So I can move it around and the image will never become like upside down or flipped or twisted or anything. It always stays exactly the right way up. So I can look at it from this side, from on top, from angled down below, from this side, wherever. and it will not be like disorienting to look at. The viewfinder also has this little built-in iris that will open and close as you put your eye up to the viewfinder. As it kind of pushes in, it will open up so then you can see through the lens, and as you move away, it will close itself. So no extra little bit of light might get down into the viewfinder and cause like any sort of light leaking on the frame of film. This is especially important if you're running the camera, but you're not looking through the viewfinder. Like if you're standing off to the side for some reason, if there was light still entering down through here, then it can potentially very easily cause a light leak on the film as it's running through the camera. And as we look through the viewfinder, then we see the ground glass of the camera, which has these frame lines on it. The frame lines are for guiding us for composing the image. And again, what you are seeing in the viewfinder is exactly what the lens is seeing, which is exactly what's being exposed onto your frame of film. The outer area of the frame lines is what your entire frame is, and then there's some safety guidelines within that frame line. You might also encounter the SR2 viewfinder extension piece, which is just this viewfinder extender. You can unscrew the actual viewfinder here like this. It would then lift off. With this off, we can see that there are two tabs here on the back of the viewfinder, which will line up with the viewfinder extension piece, which has these little holes here. And so it will connect like that. And then you can screw this ring here into place to tighten. And then the other end of the viewfinder extension piece has the same tabs that you can see as would be on the inside of that viewfinder that we were just looking at. And then these will just screw into place in the same way. So it kind of is an extension piece in between the actual viewfinder and then the rest of the body is viewfinder assembly. But you just have to kind of be careful as you're threading these together and making sure that they're sitting properly. On certain SR2 models, you may have controls on the side here which control a built-in internal light meter of the SR2. You can set the ISO or ASA of your film stock that you're using, so 50 or 250 or 200 or 500, and then there is a viewfinder indicator to show you over and under exposure. Not all SR2 models have it. Not all SR2 models that still have it have ones that function. And a lot of the time, you're better off if you're using this camera with really nice lenses, really expensive film, everything that you have sacrificed in order to be here shooting on the beautiful SR2. You're better off also just at this point knowing how to like manually use a light meter and no exposure, as opposed to relying on a very old, possibly not working SR2 light meter. This one doesn't have the light meter, so let's move on. Within the last couple of years, Lift has added a brand new HD color flicker-free Videotap to the camera, which is done by Visual Products. Visual Products offers Videotaps for a few different cameras. Lift has also added one to the Aton XDR since I made that original video a few years ago. So it has like this exact same Videotap unit on the side. It is a professional modification done by Visual Products. The camera is sent to them, they install it. It is not a kit that we get and install ourselves. A Videotap allows you to connect a monitor to the camera, so then the monitor can display what the viewfinder is seeing. Just as, you know, like any digital camera can have a monitor attached to it or a screen so that you can all look at it when you're shooting and not be limited by one person being able to look through the viewfinder when operating the camera. This specific Videotap accepts monitors through an SDI connection cable here. There's also a like controller adapter cable that plugs in here, so then you can control the options of the display for the Videotap. And there's an on-off button here. If I turn it on, you can see that little red light there. The Videotap unit is powered by the power of the camera, so it doesn't need to be charged. It doesn't have its own battery or anything like that. If there is power connected to the camera, then the power is also connected to the Videotap. The Videotap is very nice and allows you to, let's awkwardly do this now. So this is the Videotap. You are seeing what the camera is seeing directly through the lens. It is traveling up into the viewfinder area, and it is also hitting the Videotap sensor and being sent out to the monitor. You're also seeing the ground glass focusing screen in the camera, which has those frame lines that I mentioned for composing. So it is of a great use to be able to have one of these on a film camera when in the past you really would have been stuck with looking through the viewfinder. Although of course Videotaps have been around for a long time. You might see old ones as well, which are usually sending out a signal to an old school black and white display. It's definitely not going to be high definition. Usually it's not in color. We can also see that the focus will change. If I change the focus of the lens, we can see the focus change on the monitor for the Videotap. And if I can find the aperture, can close up and down, and we can see that also kind of react. Although the Videotap kind of wants to compensate for the changing brightness and darkness. And because this is a modern Videotap, it will compensate for the flicker of that shutter going. So if I start the camera, we can see that the monitor still looks nice and clear. It's a very nice, clear, bright, colorful image. So you can record this off of like a monitor recorder setup if you want to create like on-set proxies before you get your footage back to kind of have an idea of what you shot. If I'm looking at the monitor in real life, it's a little harder to see on the video that I'm recording. There is a slight bit of strobing, but it looks very, very good when the camera is running. You can't see like a full like crazy flicker that you would see on old school Videotaps. So that's really about it for the SR2. There's the magazine, the viewfinder, the lens, the controls on the side, the power at the back. There's not a lot of complicated elements to the SR2. It can be a little finicky when you're first trying to learn to load it, but it's not hard to get the hang of that once you've done it a few times. And it's not hard to run and operate the camera either. It's really a rather simple camera, which is kind of what makes it so great. I just want to mention a couple of accessories, a few other little things about the camera though. This is the standard hand grip. It is a trigger grip. So it has a trigger on the front here. It is really comfortably molded, and it has this kind of little 4-pin connector piece to it. And we're just gonna mount that on this side, the opposite side from the controls here. It's gonna screw onto this rosette connector here. And then the plug is actually under this little unit here. So we're gonna plug this, screw this on first, and then the cable plugs in very easily, slides up. This kind of little metal clip clips onto there, and then you have a nice molded hand grip here. And as I mentioned before, if we put the camera into standby mode, the middle selection here, then we can use the control to run the camera. Instead of it being like a squeeze and hold trigger, it is actually like you click it in and the camera is running. We unclick it and the camera has stopped running. The other side of the camera, you can use what's called the ARRI auxiliary hand grip, and it connects just the same. It's not a trigger, it's just a basic hand grip, this chunky thing. And then we screw it onto the rosette connector as well right here, and then you have a way of holding the camera with two nice secure hand grips, which gives you kind of a not a perfect handheld solution, because the camera is not the most comfortable without some sort of shoulder mount rig. It's not bad. I'm gonna leave this on, so it's gonna make it a little bit worse, but normally you can just kind of rest the flatness of the base on your shoulder, and then you can run the camera. Then you can use both handles here, run the camera from this side, and then it's really not too bad. It's not the most ergonomically friendly camera for using handheld without a shoulder rig. The Aton XDR, which I showed in the other video a couple years ago, is much, it's molded much better for using right on the shoulder without some sort of extra kind of rig or something. The camera is not too heavy though, with all of this on it, 400 feet in the magazine. It weighs in around 15 pounds. You can also get original ARRI lightweight support rods here that will mount on this bracket right below the lens. Lift does have that. You can find anything that Lift has on the rental catalog. If you're a member with Lift, you can find that all on the website. At the back of the camera, there are a couple other connectors that I just want to mention too, beside the power connector. So this 5-pin connector at the end here is one that you will probably also just like never use. It is for what is largely obsolete now, pilot tone, which is a reference audio signal that would go out to a separate sound recorder because these cameras cannot record sound in any way. But as you're running the camera, it could generate a tone which could be sent out to a magnetic audio tape recorder, either a field recorder or any recorder that could accept pilot tone. And then you could use that later on if the recorder needed a reference tone for transferring that tape when you were editing so that you could sync up your sound with your film. That's a whole other thing to get into, but pilot tone is pretty obsolete. Field sound recorders are also things that a lot of people won't encounter for like reel-to-reel mag tape. This would have been, not to really get into it here, but this would have been for a Niagara. This is a Niagara 4. These were like industry quality standard field audio recorders that would take audio tape, reel-to-reel magnetic audio tape, and you could run this and shoot film, and then you could use this to edit film and sound and picture together. It's a whole other thing. Pilot tone, you don't need to worry about it. The plug beside that, the middle plug here, is where you can plug in external speed control units. So not like the hand grip, but something a little more intense, such as this, which is the variable speed control unit for the SR2, and actually for the 35BL camera as well. So you can use this to run the camera from anywhere from 5 frames per second to 75 frames per second, which is the maximum speed of the SR2, of this model of the SR2. So this can be controlled by dialing in the frame rate that you want to shoot at on here. So let's set it to 5 frames per second first. We can clip this onto the top handle, and then I just have to plug this in to the back here. And with that on, it's not in standby mode to run this. It has to just run just like if you were shooting the camera normally. So if we flip it down, you can see it's running very slowly here. It's flashing. We can see the inching knob is rotating. So this is 5 frames per second. And the really cool thing about this accessory, and it's always still, you need to be careful when you're running this camera and not overdoing it, but you can use this to speed ramp, where I can dial it up until I hit 75 frames per second, which is, you're burning film really fast here, but you can do it quite quickly in order to speed ramp on the film camera. And so actually if we open this up, we can see this is when we're running at 5 frames per second, and this is as it gets faster. And even at 75 frames per second, the camera is really still not incredibly loud. Yes, it's harder to work with if you're working with sound for some reason, but it is still quite quiet when you think about how fast that film is moving through the camera. Now, that is the SR2, with a few of the accessories, the hand grip controller on the side, the variable speed controller, which you can plug onto the top, And like I said, there are lots of variations of this camera over the years. Super 16, PL lens mount. There's the SR2 high speed, which was able to run at a high speed of 155 frames as the maximum speed. There's also the SR3 high speed and the SR3 regular model as well. And then after the SR3 in the early 2000s, around 2006, is when ARRI introduced the ARRI 416, which is kind of the industry standard for a lot of modern 16mm productions these days. And before the SR series, ARRI was making 16 cameras for years as well. There is the 16BL, which stands for the 16 blimped. So it kind of had its like a blimped housing to kind of soundproof it built around the camera. There is also the 16S, the 16ST. There's the 16M, which looks like this. So it's a little more old school looking. It has a turret on the front of the camera so that it could take 3 lenses, kind of like a Bolex, but you would still outfit it. This is a 200-foot mag. Typically they'd be used with 400-foot mags. It's much louder. It's not inherently a sync sound camera, but the SR series is definitely like an improvement from these earlier ones. The SR2 really is a great camera, even if it lacks some of the bells and the whistles of the SR3 and the 416. Even if you're shooting regular 16, you can crop in on modern film stocks on a nice high quality scan of regular 16 film. You can crop that into a widescreen footage frame, no problem, and it looks great. And the SR2, usually if you find the access to rent one or to have access to one, they're usually very, very cheap and in much less demand than things like the Atons and like the later ARRIs. So yes, the SR2, it is great. It has been around for a long time. A lot of people learned 16, started in the film industry on this thing, and a lot of people are still using them today. Oh, wait, I said I was gonna shoot film. Okay, let's go shoot some film. Actually, let's go get Robin.
For this roll, I loaded it into the magazine, I put a lens on the camera, I focused and framed, I set up one very bright tungsten balanced light.
I mean, I don't care, I'm saying it right now, I don't care about fully lighting a scene. Also to you, I don't care about fully lighting a scene.
And I checked a light meter for the exposure. And then we shot some old 500T.
3, 2, 1, go. Clap.
Hi, I'm Robin, and today I'm going to show you how to make shadow puppets. I only know 3. Here's the first one I know. It's a dog. You can see these dogs right here. Woof, 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 woof. You can also have them have long ears. This is another shadow puppet. Bunnies. I'm quite bad at them, but you can kind of see this one looks better. Like this. I don't know if you can see my mouth. Then you have the bird or butterfly. And that's it. That's all the shadow puppets I know. Thanks for watching. Is that good? I also know an old man, but I don't know how to do that properly, so I didn't want to do it.
That's okay.
Let's do speed ramping now.
Speed ramping is, yeah.
Robin also taught me about a function of the speed controller where it can be plugged in still, but turned off so that the camera would default back to 24 frames per second.
The worst thing about that button is if you forget to switch from variable to the camera reference, because then you'll be shooting at 10 frames per second, not even realizing. The camera up is 24.
Yeah.
And then if it says variable, that's like the one that you are dialed into.
Oh, okay, that's the variable. Oh, I get you.
But that is very important because then if you don't switch it back to camera reference and you have the motor plugged in, you could be shooting at like 10 frames per second. You don't even know. It's worse if you've dialed up to 75 and you don't know, because then you're going to waste all that film.
All right.
This is the SR2 starting first at the lowest speed of 5 frames per second, and then I gradually turned the motor speed up until it was at 75 frames per second, which results in the footage initially being sped up and then slowing down. Oh, and during this take, actually, Robin got really dizzy and we had to stop for a second.
I stopped and I had to put my head down. Okay, you want to try again?
Yeah, I think I've got like 20 feet left.
Okay, we can try again.
Do you want me to turn it on right at 70? That's it.
Oh!
Once the roll was finished, it was sent off to Niagara Custom Lab here in Canada for processing and scanning.
Oh, I do it like one of those like gymnasts who's like. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a comment down below of what video you want to see next. You'll also see that there's links in the description of other stuff. Thank you. Sorry, I messed it all up. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below of what videos you want to see next. There's also links down in the description about Lift, this camera, and other stuff that I think he puts there normally. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.